All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? So you can see that we're joined by Doug Morris, who's the CEO of Sharesight. I'll give him a chance to introduce himself in a second. But first, we have to go through our typical housekeeping items. So anything you hear today is general advice. Doug and I don't know anything about you. We can't offer personal advice. If you're over in New Zealand, you can get a copy of our FAP from our website, morningstar.com.au. And also the New Zealand regulatory authorities would encourage you to speak to a financial advisor if you want personal advice. So today, and I'll give a little bit of an introduction before turning it over to Doug. So today we, of course, are going to talk about some of the capabilities that Sharesight has related to tax season, which we're obviously all coming up to the 30th of June. And I'll let Doug walk through sort of in general tax loss harvesting and how the whole thing works, and how you can use Sharesight to make better decisions around that. But once again, as part of your Morningstar Investor subscription, you do get access to Sharesight's Investor Plan. And one of the great things that Sharesight Investor Plan just did was actually expanded what you got in that plan. So it used to be 3 portfolios, all those portfolios with unlimited securities in it. Now it is 4, so you can go ahead and add another portfolio if you have not already done it. Somebody just said, is the sound working? I think it's working because Doug can hear me. Does anyone else? Okay, so Sally, I think that might just be an issue on your computer, but hopefully you can get that worked out. So anyway, yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about the tax capabilities in Sharesight. So a couple of things to know. Obviously, we've all seen what's happened in markets this year, and particularly in the last couple of days. And one of the things that's really important when we are in lower return environments to think of the ways that, of course, we can be efficient around taxes and certainly fees and other things as well. But I think this is timely because we're getting up to end of financial year, and also timely with what's going on in the market. So even if you did not have losses, you might have some now. So Doug, I'll turn it over to you. So maybe if you could just introduce yourself quickly, and then I know there's a couple of things you want to walk through for everyone to give a little bit of background.
Sure. Thanks very much, Mark, and hello everyone on the call. Thanks very much for taking time out of your day to chat with us. So my name is Doug Morris, and I'm the CEO of Sharesight. So as Mark said, we've got a great connection with Morningstar. So when you have access to Morningstar Premium, you also get access to our most popular premium plan, which is the Sharesight Investor Plan, which allows you to track 4 portfolios with unlimited holdings. It retails for about $380, $390. So it's a really good value that it's packaged in with Morningstar. So yeah, I guess from my perspective, I'll share just a couple of slides, and I don't want to kind of overdo it on the slide front. We'll kind of get into the product, I think, both on the Sharesight and the Morningstar side. But let me just kind of run through a couple of things here. And Mark, give me a thumbs up if you can see my presentation there. Is that all right? Yeah. So this is, by the way, our kind of updated branding. So stay tuned for this. If you like Sharesight, you're going to see some changes coming to the UX, just as a bit of a pro tip. Again, legal disclaimer, everything in here is for informational purposes only. Sharesight, we do not hold an AFSL, so I cannot provide advice. We're simply a software company. So please do seek professional taxation or financial advice regarding anything I say here, or if you have any questions. We did this presentation a year ago, and it was actually difficult to kind of, I guess, illustrate the benefits of tax loss selling, or even using kind of the capital gains tax laws to investors' advantage. But I put this here again today, and I think it's kind of more true than ever. This is a quote from Marcus Padley way back in 2015 from the SMH, which I won't read it to everybody, which is, you'll know which stocks to sell. It's those crappy little holdings you didn't sell when it became obvious you should sell. But they keep falling, those stocks. And I think it wasn't that long ago. I think November, December was sort of the peak compared to kind of where we are now. And look, I'm guilty of this too. But I guess the silver lining in this, if there is one, is that we can use some of those capital losses to offset some of the gains that we may be sitting on over the longer term in our portfolios. And our software at Sharesight can help you do that. But I love that quote, and I think it sort of stands the test of time, because I guess finally we do find ourselves in a bear market after 10, 12, even 13 years of the bull run, depending on how you kind of define things. So I suppose specifically, what do we mean by tax loss selling? The American way to term this is tax loss harvesting. Sorry, you are hearing from two Americans today, so please, I hope you are. Oh, yes, right. Yeah, well, I'm a citizen. Are you a citizen, Mark?
I am.
Oh, congratulations. Yeah, so we can make fun of both Americans and Australians in this call. But I do apologize for my Midwestern nasal kind of accent. We say tax loss harvesting in Chicago. But really what that means is a strategy that investors can use to minimize their capital gains tax exposure. So you can use losses that you're potentially uncrystallized losses, if you do sell those investments, to then offset the gains owed on things that you've sold. So in other words, if I'm sitting on poorly performing investments, which probably a lot of us are now, especially if you're sort of exposed, well, frankly, if you're exposed to any asset class except for bonds over the last 72 hours, if I'm sitting on poorly performing investments that have doubts about its future growth potential, why not consider selling to reap the tax credits? So I suppose just a quick kind of plug for what you get with your Morningstar Premium subscription. You get access to all of our tax reporting at Sharesight. That's taxable income reporting, that's capital gains tax reporting, and that's unrealized capital gains tax reporting as well. You can bring in assets from as many brokers as you'd like, and you can commingle things together in there. And basically, kind of, we respect your tax entities, be it a discretionary portfolio or an SMSF trust, not really relevant for tax, but we do track those as well. And you can also modify your sale allocation method, which I'll show you the software in just a moment. I suppose just a few kind of notes. I gave a talk to an accounting conference recently, and this is really relevant because what we've seen over the past, I guess, 24 months now is we've seen a rush into international shares from Australian investors. And we've seen a rush into other asset classes as well, namely things like crypto and kind of other esoteric investments. So again, this is not advice, but just a couple of sort of, I think, kind of waypoints to kind of keep in mind is that record keeping for international shares specifically is really important. And that comes down to foreign exchange. So all of your overseas holdings, which are now easier to invest in than ever, thanks to some of these neo brokers that have come onto the scene, that have really become popular. Taxation differs significantly based on the type of investing entity. So whether it's in your personal name, a company, or a trust, there's different rules around taxation on international shares. But importantly, the FX rates apply when you're converting back to Australian dollar for filing with the ATO. So that's true for both dividends, distributions, and the proceeds when you dispose of a holding as well. And as many of you may know, if you are investing in US shares directly, your withholding can be reduced pretty significantly, both on dividends, distributions, and even share sale proceeds with kind of that infamous W-8-BEN form. So if your broker hasn't filed that for you, please ask them to send you the W-8-BEN, because that can reduce your tax filing quite significantly. So what we see at Sharesight, just as illustrated in that bubble to the side, is that 18% of our client base are now investing in international shares. So it's certainly skyrocketed over the past couple of years, and it's more so than reported by the ATO as well. ETFs as well. So ETFs have also just absolutely skyrocketed in popularity. This hideous screenshot, I'm sure, looks familiar to probably 2/3 of the people on the call, at least based on the stats that we see. This is a registry statement based on for distributions in one of the most popular ETFs in Australia. And the point being is the ETFs they're great vehicles. I use ETFs as kind of a core satellite approach. I know Morningstar provides a lot of research and data on ETFs as well. But there is a consequence in terms of administration and record keeping in the sense that the distributions are actually quite complex when it comes to tax filing. So they're simple in nature, but they are complex in tax filing, as I just said. So they're widely used. I mean, either you're investing in them directly or through robos. They're often the choice of first-time investors, but also, as we see in our data sets, amongst experienced investors kind of doing the core satellite approach as well. So this is all down to the AMIT regime, which I won't kind of get into in more detail because everyone will fall asleep on the call, especially if you're eating or have already had your lunch. But basically, the distributions that are paid by ETFs are very complicated in terms of they have all kinds of different subcomponents, and it's your responsibility as an investor to then report those through to the ATO. And the legislation that's been changed has been really good for sort of the managed investment industry and the ETF industry. Not so good for all of us on this call as sort of mom and dad retail investors. So again, we do provide taxable income reporting this. I'll show you this actually in just a second. So I'll kind of just whip through this slide. And then finally, I hate to bring this up. I joked with Mark before the call. I said this slide was relevant up until about, 25 minutes ago. Cryptocurrencies as well. So look, crypto is an asset class that I think maybe deserves to be called an asset class, capital A, capital C. I don't know. I defer to the experts at Morningstar on that one. We do see that 12% of clients on Sharesight today do kind of hold and track a cryptocurrency more as a long-term investment, and I think as a diversification play. But if you do hold crypto, it is your responsibility to report on that from a tax perspective as well. So the ATO is receiving data from the major local crypto exchanges, just like they are the major online share brokers as well. So buying, holding, and selling crypto does incur or sort of produce a capital gains taxation event. And there's a couple of nuances here as well, where wallet to wallet transferring. So in other words, if you own Bitcoin, you transfer that from kind of one wallet to another wallet, that is not considered a transaction or a taxable event. But crypto to crypto exchanges, i.e., I'm going to reduce my holdings in Ethereum and move to Bitcoin, or I'm going to move from, say, Bitcoin to the Aussie dollar, that is considered a taxable event, which is different from how we kind of think about currencies, right? So, my mom and dad are coming down here for a couple of months to visit and see my kids. If we're moving money from, say, USD to AUD, that's not considered a taxable event necessarily. But in the Bitcoin realm or the cryptocurrency realm, it is. So please do pay attention to these rules because they're new and they're evolving. And regardless of all the hype around crypto and then the recent kind of contraction in valuation and prices, I think personally crypto is here to stay for better or for worse. So you can track crypto in Sharesight as well. So anyway, that's kind of the end of my little primer on tax. I guess, Mark, I'll turn it back over to you if you want to jump back into the system, and I'll just stop sharing my screen from here.
Okay, sounds good. Unsurprisingly, we haven't gotten a lot of questions about crypto.
Maybe a good thing.
All right, let me figure out which screen I need to go to. As always, for anyone who's tuned into these things before, I have way too many screens open. So let me go back and find, here we go. All right, so I'm just going to quickly show you the connection for people that haven't seen this before, the connection into Sharesight. So what I have here is I went onto our track investments tab. And of course, as Doug said, you do have the ability to set up and track Sharesight portfolio. So what I've done so far is I have added, there's 3 portfolios on here. There is an additional one we can add, but basically what I can do very simply is go to manage my portfolio, and that's going to take you over to Sharesight. So the way our relationship with Sharesight works is Sharesight is what you are going to use for everything that you're going to do with your portfolio. So adding new holdings to it, whether you're going to directly add those holdings or connect with a broker or manually upload a spreadsheet and anything else you want to do. And the reporting, particularly around tax and performance reporting, is all on Sharesight as well. So here we are, I'm in Sharesight. Doug, what do you want me to go do now?
Well, I guess the couple of kind of top level points around kind of portfolio setup and maintenance, which is kind of always worth mentioning, is that you can bring in historical trades from any of the brokers that you use. We support basically every broker in Australia. You can either drag and drop a CSV file of your historical trades or connect in directly through some of our API connections. And then from there, you can also use our contract note service. And so what that means is that basically you can add Sharesight into your broker in terms of we'll give you a unique email address and we can track your trades automatically going forward. So just I mentioned that as a record-keeping kind of time-saving efficiency, really. But we always encourage people who are using Sharesight to think of the portfolios that we offer in terms of their tax entities. Yeah, so you can see there that Mark has a couple of portfolios there. In a real life case, that would be kind of, Mark's discretionary ComSec portfolio, and then perhaps, Mark and his wife's SMSF trust kind of in there as well. And you could do some really clever stuff like run consolidated views across those as well. So I guess, Mark, if maybe you just run into kind of the reports tab there.
Yeah,
and our UX has conveniently changed on you, I'm sure, since last time you were here as well.
Exactly. One thing maybe we should add now, because it is a question we get. So when you are trying to add holdings, and if you do want to set up that automatic feed, people do have questions about sort of data privacy and what happens there, because they're potentially entering in their account number to create that connection. So maybe if you just want to quickly cover that.
Yeah, sure. So I guess first and foremost is that Sharesight is an independent company. We're a technology company. We're not owned or backed by any kind of broker or financial institution. And so we are agnostic, and we don't do anything with your data except help you get it into our system so that you can get kind of performance and tax insights out of that. And so we never store any information that you send us that is personal in nature. In fact, we've moved away from kind of what's known as kind of screen scraping and things like that, where we have actually kind of federated connections between ourselves and the brokers. Or, if we don't, we kind of ask you literally to drag and drop a file from the broker into Sharesight. And it's really easy to do. So, it shouldn't be much effort. But we do take privacy really seriously. And we think one of our advantages is that we do provide an independent solution for kind of a low fee, and we treat our customers' data accordingly, I suppose. So.
All right, so Doug, where do you want? And we've got some other questions coming in, and we will get to them.
Sure.
Why don't we sort of get through this first? So I cut you off here, Doug.
Sure, no, that's okay. Actually, Mark, maybe if you could actually turn the hosting duties over to me, I might just jump into my Sharesight account, because I see here that you're on a different plan than me. So what Mark is showing you actually is, I think he's on the free plan. And if anyone joining us today is a subscriber of Morningstar Premium, you should have access to our investor plan, which actually gives you some more features.
Okay. It's not. That's not my. It's a secondary account I was using. I actually. That's all 4 portfolios in my account. So I went into a secondary account, but I will.
That's always the way. So can you see my my Sharesight there?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is a sample, although sort of derived from reality portfolio for me. It used to always go up and to the right. However, it no longer does. I'm sure we're all kind of in that same position. So what I'll show you off here, let me just quickly touch on kind of those things that I mentioned. In portfolio settings, and our UX has changed quite a bit. We hope it's kind of intuitive and easy to use, but please let us know if you get stuck. You can always contact our customer support down at the bottom right. In terms of integrations, go down here. This is our integrations with certain brokers, but that contract note service that I mentioned is in our trade confirmation emails page. And this is the email address that your portfolio is given. So just add that to ComSec or AbTrade or whomever you use. They have a number of slots where you can have your contract notes sent to, and we'll receive your contract notes and update your portfolio accordingly. It's a really terrific service. And the best part about it is not only does your portfolio get updated, but your accountant will have a paper trail as well. So let me just jump back into reports. And if you are subscribed to Premium on Morningstar, you should see a look and feel that looks like this. So what I want to do is I'll first just jump into down here in the tax and compliance section. You can see we have taxable income reports, capital gains tax, historical costs, which accountants love, all trades, which actually accountants love the most, because even though I'm the CEO of Sharesight and my accountant knows what I do for a living, he always says, can you just please export the all trades report from the financial year and just send it to me. And I think, they like to go off and kind of prove the work, I suppose, although they shouldn't charge you for it if Sharesight's doing the work for you. And then finally, the unrealized capital gains tax report as well. So if I just jump into taxable income report, what this does, it basically collects all of the dividends and all of the distributions that you receive from the holdings in this particular portfolio. Now, in this case, what are we looking at here? We're looking at last financial year. I'm just going to pop that back to, actually, I'll leave that there. But anyway, the point being is that you can change the date range, the most usable one being current or last financial year. And you can see we break this into non-trust income for Australia, which is basically share dividends. So you can see Illumina, Magellan, if still holding on to that, Forex. You can see trust income as well. So that's from ETFs that are considered trusts. In this case, this iShares Global Healthcare ETF that I own, and I'll come back to the components of those distributions in just a moment. And then you can see foreign income as well. And this is really where Sharesight, I guess I could say, pays for itself, both of the trust income and the foreign income, because we collect dividends from shares that trade on, I think, 42 different exchanges around the world. And so you can see here in this situation, or this scenario, I own eBay and I own Tencent, and I'm receiving those dividends into my Sharesight account as well. And then below, we provide a really useful income tax return. It's not a return that's going to be filed directly from our system into the ATO, but what we do is we break out the alphanumeric ATO codes. So, for example, 11U franking credits, $57.83. We break those out as per the ATO's website. So hopefully you or your accountant can kind of download this or use this to then file your tax with kind of less time and aggravation. Now, on those annual tax statement components, so for the vast majority of ETFs, we actually receive those distribution breakdowns from either the ETF managers directly or from the registries. And so what that means is that when you get that hideous kind of paper statement in the post that shows all those niggly little 1 cent, 2 cent kind of components of the distributions, we'll do that work for you, and kind of come I would say July, August, we'll actually import those into our backend, into our system, and that'll be provided for you in the taxable income report. And so we're doing a lot of kind of admin and sort of data prep work for investors in that respect, because the ATO really is looking carefully at those ETF distributions, given how popular they become, especially amongst first-time investors as well. A couple of the options in here, you can show holding totals or show comments, just a couple of things too. So if you do have comments against certain distributions, perhaps it's a special distribution, you can show that in here as well. There's a note currently around our annual tax components, given that we're at tax time as well. So excuse me, I'll jump back into the reports menu, and then I'll take you through a quick tour of the capital gains tax report as well. And now in this case, I might just go since inception. It's a pretty old portfolio, as you can see. But basically what this report is doing is it's actually showing you all the realized capital gains that you've made, in this case, across the history of the portfolio. And we break that up in terms of long-term capital gains, discounted capital gains distributions, i.e., components of ETFs, capital losses. And then at the bottom, we provide a very nice summary that I promise your accountant will love, and that breaks down capital gains on shares for other method, capital gains on discount method, capital losses, and the claimable loss. So in this case, my claimable loss is a negative amount. It used to be bigger. It's smaller now, but it still is a loss that I can't claim because it's a negative number. But essentially, we break this down into holding, and we show you this in each section as well. Now, another feature of this report is that you can set a lock date. And so lock dates are meant to be used when you have, I suppose, more than 1 year of taxable information in Sharesight, and you can lock that report for the financial year, which is designed to be a proxy for how you filed your tax for that year. So you can kind of lock that away in our system, and it won't change because that's how you filed your tax, and you want to kind of preserve that official history as well. I'll come back to the sale allocation method when I go to the unrealized capital gains tax report in just a second. Also, just a note on our reports: you can download all of them into Excel, into PDF, or Google Drive as well. So next up is I'll probably skip historical cost report and all trades. Those are all trades basically just list all your transactions. Historical cost is an accounting sort of focused report. And I'll go into the unrealized capital gains tax report, which is probably most relevant for today's presentation and probably most useful to all of us who are sitting on either gains or more likely losses here on the 15th of June, 2022. So in this one, we just have a date that's sort of the end date. So show me the unrealized capital gains, i.e. the hypothetical gains or losses that I'm sitting on as at today, last week, last year, what have you. And so you can see in my case, I am sitting on some nice capital gains. Now I've kind of jobbed this demonstration to kind of widen the date range out. I mean, these are, this goes way back to 2013 in some cases, but you can imagine if you are a more frequent trader or an active investor, you have a kind of a litany of holdings here with kind of more of a rich history. But I think this gives a good demonstration of kind of what you're sitting on in terms of unrealized capital gains. In this case, about $34,000. Now, also, this is I suppose a much more fun demonstration to give in a bear market. I'm sitting on $53,000 in capital losses, right? And so these are the potential tax credits or the losses I can use to offset my gains as well. So again, in this situation, I'm taking a very wide look out, but you can see that I'm actually sitting on capital gains, less capital losses, and for a capital loss of minus $18,000. So in effect, that's my tax credit to be used. Now, obviously, this would be relevant to the financial year, but the really cool feature in here is that we allow our customers to change the sale allocation method of the parcels of shares, and the ATO, fortunately, is one of the remaining tax bodies in a world that allows investors to modify their sale allocation methods based on the parcels or the timing of the shares that they bought, either in the same company, multiple companies, or across the portfolio entirely. And so if you do click that button there, change sale allocation method, what you can see is that we allow people to change the allocation method either at the portfolio level, which will then change all the holdings in that portfolio, or we allow you to do it at the underlying holding level as well. So you can see in this case that my portfolio, it's set to the portfolio default for all the holdings, just for this example, which is last in, first out. But let's just have a play and see what happens here. So if I'm sitting on a capital loss of minus 18,000, we'll call it minus $19,000. Let's see what happens if I change it to first in, first out, which is, in other words, I'm going to dispose of the oldest parcels of shares that I bought. I'm going to update. It's going to give me a warning. Yep. So minus 19,000 becomes, minus 19,000. That's because it's actually quite an old portfolio. Let's take perhaps zero in particular, where I bought it in May of 2013. I'm sitting on a gain of $3,000. Change that one. First in, first out. Oh, it's going to change. Bad example. I'm sorry about that. It's always hard to kind of bake a cake on the fly. But anyway, the point being is that if you have a transactional history in a certain share, buys and sells over time, you can kind of pick the highs and the lows, and Sharesight will preserve that history for you and kind of model the potential tax implications for you using this feature. And I suppose the final thing to show around Sharesight at tax time is portfolio sharing. And so in the portfolio settings menu in portfolio sharing, you can actually nominate somebody to have access to your portfolio. And so what most people do here is they send access to their accountant and they give them read and write access. And so you just whack in their first name, last name, and email address. And then the accountant will send an invitation to the portfolio, and they can go in and they can do just what I've done. They can look at your trading history, your cap gains, your unrealized cap gains, and they can actually make modifications if you give them writable access as well. And I suppose kind of furthering on that is that our hope is that kind of reduces your administration fees with your accounting professionals. And if your accountants use Xero, which most do these days, you can actually connect, or they can connect on your behalf, Sharesight into Xero as well. And so what that means is that, if you're trading and receiving distributions, all that information flows into Sharesight, and then it flows into Xero into your kind of investor balance sheet in real time as well, which again should kind of increase efficiency and reduce costs for you as the investor, and should make kind of you a favorite client amongst your accountants, given kind of the the lack of shoeboxes and contract note statements that you bring in a pile and hand to them at tax time. So I suppose, Mark, that's kind of the quick run through of Sharesight at tax time. I guess I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, we've got some questions in here.
Sure.
So most of them are for you, which is why I always like these, because I don't have to speak much. So Phil is asking about managing options and leaps in Sharesight, and if you're thinking about adding those in the future.
So options is something that comes up quite a bit. We support listed options currently in Sharesight, but not all kind of off-market options. But I suppose, Phil, the best thing you can do is kind of register your interest through our chat function at the bottom right, and basically tell us that you want options supported. And we typically drive our product roadmap based on what our customers are telling us to do. So, if options are an important kind of asset class for you, please let us know, and we will look to kind of support those. We do receive the data from the ASX. It's just that we haven't built specific option functionality just yet.
All right, we've got a question from Joel. Once again, more of a product development question. Says, are there any plans for the future income report to support ETFs? Looks like this only estimates for direct investments at the moment. And Joel also says, thanks for the session, that he has enjoyed using Sharesight. It's a nice product. So a little compliment.
Thanks, Joel. Yes, so we actually have plans to overhaul the future income report entirely, which I suppose is not because we predicted a market downturn and everyone would kind of fly to yield bearing investments. But what we want to do is that the future income report basically now just shows you the announced dividends that have yet to be paid. What we want to do is actually take a page out of Sharesight's kind of notebook. In fact, maybe even use their data to then show you what the opinionated or kind of the expert analysis is on future dividends as well. We may look to do that based on historical precedent, or again, as I mentioned, on analyst estimates as well. So we think that there's probably a lot more we can do on future income, and yes, that will include both listed shares and ETFs as well, to kind of go out maybe like a year in advance, for example.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would say that I do tell people about ETFs is remember that is a distribution. It's not a dividend. And that distribution has obviously an income component, but it also has a capital gains component. And so I think the concern sometimes with ETFs is that people go back and look at them and say, that was a great distribution. This is a really high yielding ETF, but then realize that a lot of that was capital gains.
Yeah.
And, the sort of the number one example when we look at that is that FANG ETF. So the FANG ETF holds 10 securities. You go look at the securities, 9 of them don't pay a dividend. One pays a really small dividend. There was a huge distribution last year. And the reason there was a huge distribution is because they actually rebalanced quarterly and have 10 holdings. So there are all these capital gains getting distributed. And I saw a lot of comments on different forums and things like that talking about, oh, this is incredible. It's a great opportunity for income. It's like, no, It's not. You are buying securities that don't actually pay dividends. And I guarantee sort of this year with how things are going, if they keep going this way, that you are not going to get a big distribution because there certainly won't be those embedded capital gains when they do all those rebalancings. But yeah, just something to think about, Joel.
That's good.
All right, so we've got some long questions. So Rodney has a question, and Rodney goes to all of our webinars and knows a lot more than I do. So most of the time, Rodney's just correcting me. So just get ready for that, Doug. I don't know it's about Sharesight, but yeah, any chance when we get an update on when Sharesight might fully support Chi-X holdings? He's got an ETF listed on the CBOE. It's in my Sharesight portfolio, but the price does not track the daily updates. Obviously, sits at the original buy price from 6 months ago, but every now and then, when dividends are paid, it updates briefly for a day or two to the correct price and back to the original.
Well, we should. This is a bit nuanced in the weeds a bit, Rodney, but we should actually be supporting all Chi-X listed investments, i.e., CBOE. Because we actually receive our real-time data from them. So let me just ensure that we are doing that properly. We should be. But Rodney, again, if you want to just ping our customer support team and just tell them which investment specifically hasn't been updated, they'll be able to kind of do a trace on that and figure out what's going on there. But often it's the case of like, if it's something that's been esoteric or kind of thinly traded, it had, the price feed hasn't been activated per se for that investment. And it just is a bit of a kick in the pants to kind of get going again, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, this could be an issue with us, by the way, Doug, because we have problems with Chi-X data. So, Rodney, if you were looking on just, and I won't get into the technicalities of how this works, we pull in the securities from Sharesight, but then we are using Morningstar data to update things like pricing. So if you're looking at the Morningstar side of things, which I suspect you are, it's a problem with us. And I think going into Sharesight, you should be able to see things accurately. I'll fall on that grenade for you, Doug.
Yeah, no, it's we do license our information from Morningstar.
It's all a virtuous circle somehow.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got a question from Steven, or a comment, looks more like a comment. It would be useful in the sale allocation method to be able to select individual parcels of shares within a holding.
Yeah.
So not enough time to explain how it would benefit, but as an example, if I have 100 shares in ABC, bought it at $1, 100 shares in ABC, bought at $2, and I want to sell half of one parcel and half of the second parcel, I don't see how I can do that in Sharesight.
Yeah, so it's a common question we get, particularly from accountants, Stephen, or if you are an accountant or you've got a background in sort of accounting, perhaps this is kind of why you're asking the question. So what we try to do, it's a bit of a kind of a 80-20 thing. So we do automate this for customers, right? So what you can see, let's just grab Magellan. You can see here, I've got FIFO, LIFO, max gain, min gain, minimized CGT, or portfolio default for this particular holding. We then run that rule over all the individual parcels in that collective holding for you in your account. We think that for the majority of our customers provides an efficiency and a good financial outcome, as opposed to building a solution, frankly, that allows you to, I guess, as you say, divide that parcel in half. And I can't see a merit in that. And again, if you want to go to that level, if you do have, I suppose, an advantage taxation-wise that you think you could glean from doing that, I would say work with your accountant to export the all trades report and do that for that particular holding. But again, we're trying to automate this for people. And we do find that in most cases, aside from corner cases, this does automate things and provide a good financial outcome for people, at least in the system, as opposed to allowing people to kind of rip things open and do that themselves. This is the honest answer to that one. But it's a fair question, though.
So moving on, Hardy says, I have one super fund portfolio in Sharesight. I would like to duplicate the data in that portfolio and then add previous investments going back to the 90s. How would I go about that?
All right. Good question. This comes up sometimes. So Hardy, what I would do, go to reports, go to all trades. I'll just mimic that here. So go for the original portfolio you want to use, go to that portfolio, go to reports, go to all trades, widen this out to since inception, as I've done here, and export that, right? So then that becomes kind of your transactional history that's now kind of outside of Sharesight. Then create a new portfolio and import that Excel file that you exported as the basis of your new portfolio. And so for that, I mean, you create a new portfolio, you give it a name here. So just give this, we'll call this Hardy. We'll do this on the fly. You said SMSF, create portfolio, and then import from CSV, this option here on the right-hand side in green, click that, and then upload your individual trades file that you exported as the basis of that new portfolio. Leave that there, and then go back and get the history that you mentioned back to the 90s. So our share price and dividend data for the ASX goes back to 1998. Just bear that in mind. Grab that from wherever it lives, and then import that as well. Sharesight's smart enough to understand kind of the precedence of trades in terms of the lineage, and go from there. So basically, use one portfolio, take a snapshot of it, export it, and then create a new one with that data. If you follow me, so it is possible.
Awesome. So question from Rodney again. With the tax loss selling, and I will say, just reading the question before, this might get into advice. So obviously, Doug, feel free to say no. But with the tax loss selling aspect also work to offset capital gains you might have received from ETFs and managed funds or distributed capital gains, even if you didn't actually sell any holdings for capital gain.
If there are capital components to those, I think it might. I think it might subjectively, bearing in mind I cannot provide taxation advice. Yeah. That's my answer there.
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Ronnie. All right, so Lisa, by the way, Doug, has 3 alpacas, which I believe is 3 more than you have. So something to think about.
Yes.
Does the Sharesight user need to input historical buy and sell activity if their portfolio goes back over 20 years and over more than one investment broker, even pre-online broking?
So again, yes. So we go back to 1998 in terms of our price data. So what that means is that if you want Sharesight to kind of pick up and run with your performance and therefore your tax, you can kind of only go back to 1998. We are, and then also another comment on that is that you can either build your portfolio of historical trades over time, which is the detailed way to do it, or you can begin from an opening balance. So Lisa, if you wanted to start your portfolio from say, 1 July 1999, we can begin with an opening balance for each of your investments and go forward from there, which is often quite easy based on a financial report from your tax professional. And finally, we're broker agnostic. And so when we're looking at this, say Doug Morris's portfolio here, this is something that can live totally, independent brokers. So, in this case, I might be using ComSec, I might be using Charles Schwab, I might be using Stake, and I can have those brokers all feeding into this portfolio, or not at all. I may choose to maintain this manually, which interestingly, a lot of our customers do, because they kind of like to go in to understand the system and make updates kind of by hand, if you will. So it's totally agnostic brokers. It doesn't need a broker to run. Nor an alpaca.
Yeah. And think about, Lisa, what I would say is think about what you're trying to get out of Sharesight, right? So, obviously, if you want to go back, and frankly, I do this. I do have US accounts that I put into my Sharesight, and in that case, I thought, okay, I don't really need to go back and add all of this information because, what am I trying to get out of this? I don't necessarily need, in my mind, the performance going back, some of my accounts in the early 2000s since I started them. So yeah, I just sort of took a decision that, okay, I'm going to put this stuff in today and use today, and then, use the functionality going forward where I'll start inputting trades rather than go back, over 20 years of input trades just because I didn't think I needed that performance. And that's obviously, it's just thinking about what you need out of that. And if you want it to support your taxes going forward, for example, or you want to, if you're sitting there today and haven't set up a Sharesight account, you're just really looking from a tax perspective, like go in and take that cutoff point and put in your cost basis and go from there.
Yep. I just whacked in a benchmark. I realized I didn't have one of this portfolio, by the way. It's a really nice feature. We allow you to benchmark against many securities in the database. I like to benchmark against ETFs. I like to think of this as like a true plan B kind of investment alternative. And you can see I just this portfolio, frankly, is a not a dollar for dollar comparison, but it's a similar one to the way I invest. And I compare that against the Vanguard All World, FTSE All World. And you can see here that the benchmark in red versus my portfolio there in kind of that orange. And you can see the difference here numerically in terms of cap gains, dividends, currencies, and therefore the total annualized return. So the case has been made that I should have shifted my money back to the indexation experts at Vanguard some time ago.
All right, we've got a couple other questions. So got a question about crypto. So Clayton is saying, can I track crypto from my exchange? So Swift and Digital Surge.
Yeah. So our support for crypto now, it's just about to change. We're going to add in a whole bunch more crypto coins and currency. We treat those as basically buy and hold investments. And so you can add those in as a new holding and just add those as a, just search for it here and just whack it in as an investment. We don't currently have integrations with the crypto exchanges themselves directly. We are looking potentially at supporting some of the major ones. But the two you just mentioned, for example, are not quite on our list. We'd be looking at ones like Coinbase or potentially CoinSpot locally. The challenge for us is that there are so many different exchanges out there, and they all require a different integration. And investors are often moving wallets from one exchange to another. So that is, I suppose, just a decision for us. But at the very least, if you are a crypto kind of buy and hold person, which is kind of more our focus, you can put in Ethereum or soon Doge or Bitcoin and buy and hold and track that through time, and the taxation reports will cover that stuff as well.
All right, so we've got a question from Julie saying that she's been using Sharesight successfully for a couple of years, but was not able to have a net wealth account auto transfer. Best way to handle that.
Interesting. So net wealth being the investment platform. So I guess well, just to speak plainly, net wealth is an investment platform that's used by advisors, and they're charging you, Julie, asset-based fees on the assets you have on net wealth. Sharesight's almost the answer or the challenge to that entire concept. We don't charge asset-based fees. We have a free version that anybody and their dog can sign up to check out, kick the tires. If you do join the premium plan, you pay a couple $100 a year for it, regardless of how big or small your portfolio is or how much you trade. So I suppose that's one way of saying we don't really play nice with the platforms. But you should be able to get from net wealth, or your advisor or your accountant should be able to get from net wealth at least an export of your trading history. And if you do that, you can at least import that through the mechanism I showed moments ago to create that portfolio in Sharesight. So that information is yours, and frankly, you should be able to get that kind of all trades, that transactional history file from NetWealth, and then import that into Sharesight. And as a corollary, we do support other platforms, namely, let's find it here. Sorry for the logo buffet. Anyway, Premium's on here, for example, as well. So we can interact with Premium to bring in those holdings from that platform, for example. But that's kind of the context on NetWealth. Okay,
yeah, and I think, so a couple other questions I think we can get through quickly. Even I think I can answer some of these. How would Sharesight manage shares or ETFs that are in joint accounts?
Yeah, again, it doesn't matter. So when you create that portfolio, this is kind of your entity to kind of set up in terms of the rules. So this can be, Mr. and Mrs. whatever. the residency dictates the currency. Financial year end is just when the reports run, and then you set, is it a discretionary tax entity, is it an SMSF, or is it a company? But if you have a joint account, say with ComSec or NavTrade or whatever, it'll process the trades just as they do. It doesn't matter. And again, if you even have a joint account where you or your wife or your husband have different brokers, that can now be feeding into Sharesight as well. So perhaps you have that joint account, tradable on two different brokerage platforms. That could be feeding into Sharesight as well. So it's ultimately flexible in terms of how you handle and create the entities in Sharesight.
Yeah. And then how about, we talked a little bit about consolidated views.
Sure.
And there is a question from Tony. He's curious why many Sharesight reports are not available when you move into that consolidated view.
It's a good question. So consolidated views are a way to kind of track multiple portfolios, multiple portfolio entities, in one go. So they're available up here. You can go to this top level portfolio view, move down here. And if I create, oh, by the way, you can share portfolios with your friends as well, just as a bit of a side comment there. The consolidated view, I don't have any set up in this particular demo account, but let's create one. I'll kind of show you how that works. So this would be like, you call this like, total, invested wealth or something. Again, you set up financial year end, blah, 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 and then portfolios to include. In this case, I didn't add anything to that Hardy portfolio, but let's just create it just for the sake of example today. So what that's done, it's pulled in my Doug Morris portfolio and my Hardy portfolio. And what the question is really centered on is why in the reports menu am I only seeing a limited set? Well, the reason for that is basically we only provide performance reports on a consolidated view because the assumption is that your taxable reporting requirements are specific to those underlying entities, right? So there's kind of no point running a capital gains tax report against two entities that in all likelihood or maybe are taxed differently. So again, we're really trying to match the tax entities that you're responsible for reporting against as an investor with the way you track those portfolios in Sharesight, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's got time for a couple more, I think. So Sean has a question. So he's saying that his plan is for portfolios. Can I set one up for shares, one for managed funds, one for property, and one for cash, and then look at them in consolidated views?
Sure. Yeah, and in fact, again, you definitely can do that. It's got a number of ways to skin a cat. The other thing you could do, so you can set those up for shares, property, managed funds, bring those in a consolidated view, and then in the consolidated view will show you very nicely which portfolios those things belong to. So yeah, it's a really easy way to track your performance on those. So you definitely can do that. Yeah. But again, just think about the taxation requirements. Like if you're required to then report, sort of a capital gains tax report on that as a whole, you may have to do that 3 times, or again, just share access with your accountant and just explain kind of how you set things up. And it shouldn't be too much trouble for them. But yeah, you can definitely do that.
All right. So Michael says, when confirming automated distributions for ETFs, and that's actually a process of Sharesight where you do go in and confirm dividends and confirm distributions. So he says, when confirming automated distributions for ETFs, the fields shown do not seem to match the fields on the ETF statement. Is there a need to check these, or should I rely on Sharesight to get these right, or should the fields be updated to verify?
Yeah, so I guess the official answer, Michael, is that you should always check. Please always check with the registry statement or your accountant on that. We are receiving that information sort of secondhand from the product providers, and we don't kind of go in obviously and look on an individual basis as to whether or not those are correct. So just double check those. But the more, I guess, overriding an important point is that we often don't know what those fields are until post 30 June. So we rely on sort of the books to close on those trusts, on those ETFs and those managed funds to then receive the information from the fund manager, the ETF manager, and then we go back and we update things retrospectively. So if you just pay attention to our newsletter and our blog, you'll know when we update those, or we'll ping you through the little chat widget as well, and we'll go back and we'll update those. Because as you can imagine, as the kind of year goes on, we don't know what the final sort of tallies are, or even in some cases the actual reportable line items. It's only when the manager sort of reports that, closes their books, then we get that information. So it's a tricky thing with some of the ETFs, especially where it's like it's real time until they go back and they adjust things. And we will help you with that if you leave them unconfirmed.
And then got one more question, and then I think we might have to call time. So another question about sort of views of different asset classes. So Cara says, there's a personal portfolio which includes stocks, property, and gold. Is there a way of analyzing them separately without having to have them in different portfolios? So I guess just analysis by asset class.
Absolutely. Yep. And this is a major area of future development for us. So I guess watch this space. But if you have one portfolio and with kind of different themes inside of that, and that, in fact, that's relevant to me. So I take a core satellite approach, as I mentioned. We've got some ETFs. I got shares, kind of satellites of shares. But for me personally, I've got like software companies that I like. I've got Chinese tech companies that I sort of used to like. I've got various kind of thematics working. So the way that I manage that, if you just go up to account here and go to custom groups, and you have access to this feature as a Morningstar Premium customer, this is where you can set up your own worldview and your own categorization or taxonomy of the holdings in your investments, right? So here I've got nothing categorized. So these are all the shares we've been looking at for today's demo. So let's say I want to add a new category and I want to talk about like sort of, precious metals, right? Now, you can define this however you want. This could be precious metals ETFs. This could be listed gold companies. This could be whatever. And now obviously I'm not going to, let's take alumina. It's aluminium. I got the pronunciation right, not aluminum. You might chuck that in there, right? Add a new category here. This might be sort of, core ETFs, super, or whatever you want to, call it. And then you might, add in your ETFs into this. So it's a simple, create the category, drag and drop. Now, if I just, and I'll just chuck a few more in here just to kind of fulfill the example. Forex not a precious metal, but you guys get the idea. So this is now available to me across all portfolios. I go back into my portfolio, and let's say I want to run one of my favorite reports, which is contribution analysis report. So it shows you kind of the detractors and additive companies in your portfolio. This shows me on an individual basis who's adding or detracting from my portfolio. But let's say that I wanted to use my custom grouping that we just set up. So again, this is your kind of own asset class, your own in-house asset class view. We're going to get a weird one here, but you get the idea. So I have my precious metals and my core ETFs, and then I have all the uncategorized stuff because we didn't, take the time to dump those into buckets that we created. But I think that kind of shows how you can use your own categorization system in our software. And this is available to you in any report too. So performance report or the overview page or anything you want to run. Again, so we have precious metals, core ETFs, then uncategorized here. So that's available in anywhere you see the groupings. You can do market, currency, sector, blah, 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 or then your own custom ones. It's a really good feature, custom groups.
All right, that's awesome, Doug. So we have hit time. There are a couple questions, comments, John and Pond. Please email me directly. They're just sort of questions about Morningstar Investor and the relationship. So it's mark.lamonica1@morningstar.com. My email address and name is in the invite, and I can answer those. But anyway, Doug, I want to thank you. You spoke the whole time, so this was nice and easy for me about very complex stuff. So I appreciate it. I'm sure everyone else appreciates it. So you guys if anyone does have a question, obviously reach out to me. I can get it to the Sharesight team. But anyway, thank you very much, Doug.
Yeah, no problem. And thank you guys for listening. And Mark, thanks for hosting today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you, guys.